Good evening. Chris Lee and Blayne Gilmer of Southeastern 14 here. The almost Christmas edition of the show. Blayne, good to have you on with me tonight.
Yeah, you as well, man. I know you're doing a little bit of seeing some family, doing some traveling right now, but we had a little confusion last night. So I don't know if Rusty's on here tonight.
Well, what we had is a plumbing emergency.
Yeah, my garbage disposal broke last night, and there was water everywhere, and it was my wife was trying to get three kids, put to bed. One of them being a 3-week-old, so it was just not an ideal time. But we apologize for having to postpone till tonight. But we're here talking about the early signing period and the winners and the losers, and the transfer portal is hopping in the SEC. So there's a lot to talk about here, Chris. And, just we always enjoy talking to the people in the chat. So I hope you'll jump in there and give us your thoughts on signing periods. Were you happy with your school's signing period, transfer portal, all of those things that we'll be talking about tonight, Chris?
Do you know what I see when I look out the window where I am?
What do you see?
The foothills of the Rocky Mountains. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, you and Dion hanging out over there?
Not yet, but I was actually going to go to see a Colorado basketball game last night. That was sort of in the plans, but that's what I would have done had we not had a live stream schedule. But
yeah,
it was. Would you like to guess the temperature where I am?
Rusty, you're back. Thank you so much.
Rusty, we apologize. Last night was a life happens night. I'm doing this 1,200 miles from home. I brought my equipment. That's how dedicated we are.
Yeah, we and if I hadn't have been literally taking a garbage disposal apart and trying to figure all that and mop up water, then I would have been on here. But so appreciate you being on, Rusty. See J-Way Trucking. He says UGA has reloaded. Didn't take people long to bring that one up, Chris. And I know you've been watching it as well as I have. Goodness gracious, Georgia, is known for the tight ends and the running backs in that offense, and now they've added 2 top-of-the-line wide receivers from SEC schools.
Yeah, what happened with that? Because Georgia, I don't think had taken anybody from the portal till this year, and then Thomas and Dominic Lovett, who were 2 of the top guys in the league. What was up with that? Why this sudden change of heart?
It's not like that. That's a little bit of a skewed narrative. Kirby Smart used it as a kind of he uses it as a bragging point sometimes. Like after a game, after that Tennessee game, he looked into the camera and said, "We took 0 guys in the portal." He did that right there on CBS, 0 guys in the portal. But it's not like they didn't try. They tried to get some guys out of the portal last year. They just wasn't the right fit and wasn't the right circumstance. But this year, Georgia desperately, because of what's going to be leaving that wide receiver room, and people are like, well, who's leaving? It's not about the production. It's about the numbers. There's going to be guys that are depth guys and things like that. And Chris, you need to have 12, 13, receivers on the team just to be able to practice the way you want to practice. Right. So Georgia had to add numbers, but then you go out and you have the opportunity once they enter the portal, you get reached out to by a Thomas. You get reached out to by Dominic Lovett. You don't turn and look the other way. Those guys are extremely, extremely productive. And I said this, arguably. Now I know George Pickens at Georgia was a true number 1 outside receiver, more big body type guy. And when you're talking about dynamic receivers, Dominic Lovett has the chance to be the most dynamic receiver that Georgia's had since Mecole Hardman.
Well, I would argue that Lovett was behind Jalen Hyatt, maybe the best receiver in the league this year.
Yeah, people want to bring up size. He's 5'7" or whatever it is. He's not a big guy, but
a lot of balls. Missouri did not have much of a passing game either, Blayne. That's the thing.
Yeah, you're talking about Brady Cook passing the football. Brady Cook is a phenomenal athlete, does a lot of things with his legs. He's not the most gifted passer in the SEC. And, man, did he, you talk about, Missouri in their own right, they've done a good job they've done a good job. South Carolina guy takes exception to your comment there. He says Juice Wells Juice Wells was very, very good. He was very, very good.
There were a lot of good receivers this year in the league. There weren't a lot of great ones. It was kind of Jalen Hyatt and then a pretty good drop off to, I don't know, maybe 10 guys.
The thing that's scary about the Georgia team, right, is that this year with the defense that they have, they're all young guys, right? Because they replaced 8 starters from a year ago. So now they're going to be bringing 7 or 8 back from this team that could possibly win back-to-back national championships if they were able to take care of Ohio State and either Michigan or TCU. So they could have 7 or 8 starters returning on defense, and then they could have probably 6 or 7 starters plus guys like Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett coming in and adding to the wide receiver group that would already have A.D. Mitchell and already have Ladd McConkey. Now, the question for Georgia next year is going to be who the quarterback is. Is it going to be Carson Beck? Is it going to be Brock Vandegrift or Gunnar Stockton? But goodness gracious, Chris, that's the rich get richer. And it wasn't just Georgia. When we talk about signing day stuff, you've been around recruiting and covering college football for a long time. I don't know that I've seen a more balanced and well-recruited class than Alabama's this year.
Well, back to Georgia for a minute. Did I read that Georgia signed 7 top 100 players on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, two 5-star edge guys, and we know how important the edges are, right? In defense now, in terms of being able to set the edge on the run and also being able to get around the edge on in terms of rushing the passer. And they got kind of bookends to do both. Samuel Mpemba is a guy who's more of he looks like Adonis. I mean, he's just sculpted up, probably 6'4", 6'5", close to 250 pounds. He's going to really be able to set the edge. Sometimes can come in and play a 5 technique if needed. But then you got Damon Wilson, who's more got those long arms and is able to really get after the passer. So they've got those guys as well. Jonell Aguero is one of the top safeties in the country, and the inside linebackers that they brought in, Raylan Wilson and Troy Bowles, who is Todd Bowles, the head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' son, coming in at inside linebacker. So Georgia definitely reloaded in terms of on the defensive side of the ball as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing what they continue to do there every year. I mean, this year they lost so many kids off that team last year, and they just reloaded. I mean, I guess you could say Georgia's secondary wasn't up to the standard of a year ago, and the sack numbers weren't huge for Georgia. But, I mean, it just kind of didn't matter. I mean, and holding them up to the bar of last year was a little ridiculous anyway. But somehow Alabama pulls off a better class, though.
Yeah, and Alabama
rivals, and I guess most of them. Yeah.
Jay-Way says right here that Beck, he expects Beck to be the starter and maybe even having a Heisman type year. Listen, he's going to have a lot of weapons for sure. And Carson Beck has not played much for Georgia, but this is his 4th year at Georgia and his 3rd year with Todd Monken. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But you're right. Let's transition to Alabama here. Alabama has a recruiting class that, believe it or not, most people thought that there wouldn't be a recruiting class for a long time that rivaled the one that Texas A&M put together just over one cycle ago. Well, Alabama has done that, and they even have gone into the state of Georgia, in Georgia's own backyard, and gotten 2 of the best players in the state and in the country for that matter, and Justice Haynes, a running back, and Caleb Downs, a safety. Listen, Caleb Downs is I've been watching Georgia high school football for a long time. I've been watching recruiting for a long time. Caleb Downs is one of the most natural, most gifted high school football players I've ever seen. And Alabama certainly could use some help in the secondary. Their safeties got exposed a little bit at times this year. And Chris, they've went out and done that, but also go out and get guys like Quay Russaw and James Smith, 2 big, one an outside linebacker, one a defensive tackle from the Carver High School in the Montgomery, Alabama area. They win that battle over Auburn, over Florida, over Georgia. So, and then Caden Proctor, a 6'6" offensive tackle from Iowa that had the Hawkeyes written all over. They flip him right before. So a truly unbelievable class for the Alabama Crimson Tide.
What else stood out to you as among the bigger storylines in the SEC and National Signing Day. Of course, Tennessee got its quarterback, the alleged $6 million man or whatever the price tag was. I mean, just a lot of schools cleaned up. I think every school in the league wound up in Rivals top 50.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. It's not like it's not just the current SEC. What stood out to me is, okay, in 2 years, Texas and Oklahoma are going to be
Oklahoma cleaned up too, right?
and so did
and Texas.
Texas right now in the Rivals recruiting rankings is 3rd, and Oklahoma is 7th. So I mean, you got Alabama, Georgia, Texas at 3, and then the next SEC team is LSU at 6, Oklahoma's at 7, Tennessee comes in at 10. What strikes me is that this brand that is the SEC, because of how talented it is, it's only going to get more competitive and more talent laden. I know people like to chide Texas and Oklahoma, make fun of some of the performances they've had over the last, but I'm telling you, when you go into people's living rooms and you're able to have that SEC logo, on your gear there, Chris, it just changes things a little bit in terms of recruiting wise and what the SEC is known for to put out in the NFL. So I think that's going to help Texas and Oklahoma on the trail tremendously. And we know that recruiting is the lifeblood of winning. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think that was a surprise to me. But LSU, Brian Kelly was someone that even us, I think at times, dating all the way back to when the hire was made, Chris, we were like, okay, is this a good cultural fit for LSU? Is he going to, this is the direct opposite of
a good cultural fit at LSU is, can you win?
Yeah. But I'm talking about, you had Ed Orgeron, who with if he had some self-control and some discipline in that program, he basically embodied what LSU is. I mean, he was kind of that nature about him. Brian Kelly seems the antithesis of all that, but yet in his first year, he beats Alabama and goes to the SEC West championship, or he wins the SEC West, goes to the SEC championship. And now he's put together the number 6 recruiting class in the country, and really is kickstarting things early. I mean, are you surprised with how quickly Brian Kelly has kind of gotten the machine rolling over there in Baton Rouge?
No. I mean, LSU's always been able to recruit. You can throw a rock and hit kids in that state. You're proximate to Texas. I mean, look, LSU has won national titles with less miles than Ed Orgeron, who, like, if you made a list of the guys that had you the need to someone to coach your football team today and your life depended on it, I'm going to guess you could easily get through 5 or 6 dozen guys before you would get to those two. Is that fair?
Yeah. No,
and those guys won national titles, as did Nick Saban, who obviously that description doesn't apply. But my point is, you've had 3 different guys win national titles at LSU since what? Some kids that are in college and playing now have been alive.
Yeah.
I mean, would it surprise you Brian Kelly's the 4th? I mean, I think I know your answer to that, but
no, I mean, it wouldn't at all. But the thing you talked about, that class, they picked up 5 guys. They've got 25 commits right now. 5 guys, or 25 commits / signees. You got 5 out of Texas. They got 4 out of the 4 out of the state of Georgia. And they haven't even really dabbled into Florida yet too much yet. And I'm sure they will at some point over there. But my goodness, when you talk about being able to go into Georgia. And here's the thing people don't know.
Did Georgia sign more kids? Speaking of that, didn't Georgia sign more kids out of Florida than out of Georgia this year?
I'd have to look at I ain't even thought about that. I'd have to go look at the breakdown. I know they signed a lot from Georgia under Kirby Smart. Since Kirby Smart has been there, Chris, it has been a concerted move to get outside of Georgia. They still want to land guys in the state of Georgia, obviously, because the talent so talent rich, but they view it as the whole United States as their recruiting footprint, and that they're just going to go get the best guys they possibly can. And it's worked for Kirby Smart. He hadn't finished worse.
Let me ask you. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but could you win a national title solely recruiting players from the state of Georgia?
I mean, the state, it used to be It used to be, if you asked people about 10 years ago, Chris, it used to be, okay, Texas, California, and Florida. That's where the talent is. And Georgia was kind of a distant fourth. But really, in the last 10 years, Georgia has severely closed the gap. And I would argue to say, when you look, I think I saw a statistic, when you look at the last 4 NFL drafts, there's been so many guys drafted that played high school ball in the state of Georgia. So that definitely the high school football in Georgia is getting much better. And to that point, Georgia, one of the first things that Brian Kelly, we're talking about LSU, one of the first things that he did, he took Cortez Hankton from the Georgia staff, who's a Louisiana native, but he was Georgia's wide receiver coach. He brought him back to Georgia, and he also took the guy who worked closely with him in the Georgia's recruiting department, Bobby Barnum, from Georgia. And Bobby Barnum coming to LSU paid direct dividends. Okay. He paid direct dividends because they signed Whit Weeks, DJ Chester, Michael Daughtery, and Paul Mugbemba, all out of the state of Georgia. And in 2024,
say that again.
I can't pronounce. I'm not going to try that again. And then JoJo Stone is a 2024 athlete out of Grayson High School. Same one as Michael Daughtery there. So not only is Brian Kelly, winning on the field, he made some good coaching staff moves early on that are already paying dividends. Rusty makes a point here while we're talking about Georgia high school football. Arkansas got Malachi Singleton, a quarterback from North Cobb High School out of Georgia, who is a just really, really good dual threat quarterback. You talk about he's not as big as KJ Jefferson, but he plays a lot like a KJ Jefferson, a guy who is a rugged runner, has a big arm. And then, of course, we know that Sam Pittman, one of the first moves he did, he signed Jimmy Smith as his running back coach, who was a multi-time state championship coach at Cedar Grove High School in Ellenwood, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta. So to your point, Chris, the state of Georgia is just absolutely rugged right now with high school talent in all the SEC schools, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida. Everybody's dipping into the Peach State to get some of that talent.
Looking at rivals top whatever here, Alabama 1, Georgia 2, future SEC member Texas at 3, LSU at 6, future SEC member Oklahoma at 7, Tennessee at 10. We haven't talked much about the Vols yet. Florida at 12 was kind of interesting. And A&M at 14.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
Florida, they were disappointed. If you go look at the Florida message board, Chris, it was anarchy. Like the Florida fans are saying the sky is falling because of how they lost some guys late. One recruit actually flipped on signing day from Florida. Isaiah Nixon flipped from Florida to UCF. The Golden Knights got one from him. And then, of course, they thought for a long time they were going to get Cormani McClain. So did Miami, but guess where he ends up? He's probably going to Colorado. I thought that big baby Jordan Hall was a guy they had a chance to get, and he pulls the ultimate troll move and has a Florida book bag today, and then pulls a Georgia hat out of the Florida book bag. So that's just pain when you're talking about the recruiting. And that was the big thing, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan Mullen, I don't think it was ever a question, can he get stuff done on the field? Because I think he took what was considered at sometimes lesser talent and even brought it, like Kyle Trask, developed him into a really good quarterback in the SEC and took him to an SEC championship game. In fact, was a thrown shoe away from competing for a CFP berth in that SEC championship game and took Alabama to the brink. But the reason that Dan Mullen got fired is because of the perceived lack of recruiting power that Florida had. And now, you talk about Billy Napier's first full cycle where really, they took Georgia's recruiting coordinator, on-campus recruiting coordinator, Katie Turner, brought her in and, thought they were going to kind of pick things up, and really just not a big impact right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the bowl game had much to do with it here. Do you? I mean, that was
I
You
think
knew going in, if Florida could even keep that close, that seemed like it would be a miracle given how many players they were down.
yeah, I do think that some of the effort you saw in that game was pretty bad in terms of
It's hard to score when you don't have a quarterback, but
no, I'm talking about defensive effort sometimes, a lot of
okay.
low and all that kind of stuff. I think so that
I
but
was en route to the west, so I didn't get to see that one.
yeah, there was some lack of discipline. There was some things that were, you know, listen, Florida was penalized. You've said it. Florida was penalized as much as anybody, I believe, this year in the SEC.
No, they were leading the conference in fewest penalties until
Oh,
late in the year.
it
was the other way around.
Alabama was one of the
Now,
most
Alabama
penalized.
was the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, they were one of the most penalized, but it was so it was uncharacteristic. They had a lot of penalties. They had some special team mistakes. They could not run the football. And what did Florida do all year? They ran the football. So yeah, but I agree. They had a mass exodus in the portal. They were down to the third quarterback. But speaking of quarterback, we got to talk about that. They brought in Graham Mertz out of the transfer portal
That's where I wanted to go
from
next.
Wisconsin, and that's been met with mixed emotions there. Chris, I mean, you've watched
His
like
numbers
college football.
weren't great this year. I mean,
His numbers haven't been
19
great.
touchdowns and 10 picks.
Yeah, his numbers haven't been great, really. That Wisconsin offense, you talk about why people got fired. The Wisconsin offense is why Paul Chryst got fired. For them, they had a good defense that would hold people down, but they couldn't score points. And Graham Mertz was running that ship. And here's my thing that I question about that is when you go back and you look at Billy Napier's background, especially his success that he had at Louisiana Lafayette. What did he have? He had a mobile quarterback, a guy that could hurt you with his legs. And I thought that when Florida was their best this year, it was when they kind of unshackled that offense and actually let Anthony Richardson run the football, which they didn't do quite enough, in my opinion. And this is a little sidebar. I saw an NFL mock draft. Can you guess where Anthony Richardson is projected to be picked?
I mean, look, you saw him in the top 10 at some points of the year. I call nothing against Anthony Richardson. I'll call nonsense on that, though. I mean, and you see this stuff change a lot between now and after the combine when they really dig in on players. But I'm going to guess he's still maybe first rounder by somebody just based on the
number
talent.
11
Okay.
to the Carolina Panthers is where people have got him slotted a lot. And heck, he does play a lot like Cam Newton. So if they wanted to use him that way, for sure. But anyways, that's besides the point. I think Florida is better when they have a mobile quarterback, and Graham Mertz is not necessarily a mobile quarterback. So I'm a little shocked by the move there. Now they do have Jaden Rashada coming in, who they signed. That you thought that Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee's NIL deal was eye-popping. It's been reported. Again, we can't substantiate these numbers. We can only go by what's reported out there because they don't give us contracts like in the NFL. It's not reported on ESPN and stuff. But it's been rumored out there between $10 and $11 million of battle going back and forth between Miami and the University of Florida. Rashada was committed to Miami, ended up flipping to Florida. So, Chris, my opinion is if it's even close to that amount of money with Florida's collective being involved, I don't see how Graham Mertz sees the field if you're paying Jaden Rashada that much to come to the University of Florida.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question, and then I'm going to take a quick word for a sponsor before you answer, which will give you time to think about it. Look, I was told by a friend of mine who's pretty well connected in the league, golfs with people who, connected a lot of schools and knows people in the SEC office, that kind of stuff. I was told that Florida was the next program that everybody was scared of because, look, obvious reasons. Florida has had success before. Florida has won national titles. It is, obviously the recruiting situation is very ideal. And they got a coach in Billy Napier who brought some discipline to that program that it needs. And I'm not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater on them at 6-7. Most projections that I saw, I think at best had Florida 8-4. And I'm also not willing to
I
throw
had
down
him
the scrap
at
heap.
I had him at 5-7 before the year, just so you
Okay,
know.
well, so you weren't surprised. I think that's what Athlon's had them at, if that seems correct. But what I'm getting at is a lot of people have seen them as the next up and coming power because of who Florida is, where Florida is, the success it has had, and a coach that is very highly regarded and is going to bring discipline to a program that has sorely needed it under a lot of coaches, frankly, since Steve Spurrier left. And I want to ask you if you, I know that wasn't your take necessarily, but I want to hear your input on that. What you think of that now that Florida's signing class has come and gone, and as you said, viewed as a disappointment. But first, before we do it, we want to give a shout out to the people who help us and make this channel possible. And that starts with our friends at Stakes, which is not a gambling app, it's a predictions app. You can get your predictions on the record, predict anything for the game, in the game for free. See how you measure up against fans and influencers. Broadcast your takes to our community of sports fans with just a few taps on your phone and earn credibility. You can build your public perceptions or predictions track record by winning competitions and earning NFT trophies for making the perfect call. Go to Play with Stakes. That's stakes.com/14. You can see that on the ticker. Use our invite code Southeastern14 and get a double welcome bonus. Okay, I asked you a long-winded question.
Give me a synopsis of that question again.
Well, Florida was seen as the next up-and-coming power in the league for all the reasons that we would know. Are you buying or selling on that?
I didn't think, and I'm gonna put up what SC Scout guy said. I think Napier's a good coach, a really good man. I think he might even be a better man than a coach. I really have a lot of respect for who Billy Napier is as a man and what he stands for. But that doesn't make you a great fit at Florida. And here's the thing: when you're a power program like a Florida, like Alabama, like a Tennessee, like a Georgia, like I'll even throw Auburn in the mix over there, in the SEC, LSU. Those programs that have been to the mountaintop, that have won national championships in the SEC, and you bring in a coach who has not been a head coach at that level yet, and he was at the group of five level. I think you're taking a leap right there. At least Dan Mullen had been a head coach at Mississippi State before and had gotten Mississippi State to number 1 in the country when Dak Prescott was at quarterback. In fact, they were the first ever number 1 team in the college football playoffs. I questioned this hire right at the beginning. Like I said, not because Billy Napier's not a good football coach or he's not a good man. I think he's both of those things, but it doesn't make him a good fit for Florida. You're having to learn a lot of things right off the bat, and I don't know how much patience Florida is going to have, because it's not going to be a next year Florida is competing for the East thing. They're going to be behind Tennessee, in my opinion. Now with Kentucky bringing on Devin Leary and Ray Davis, I think they're solidly behind Kentucky, especially if Kentucky can shore up their offensive line. I think Tennessee has more juice than them right now. Missouri is even pretty talented as well, with guys they've brought in. They still have Luther Burden. They got Brady Cook returned. They got Theo Wees they've brought in. Mass exodus for Florida in the portal. What can they bring in? The recruiting class was not necessarily what they wanted. I don't know. I'm not real high on Florida as a program, and I'm not necessarily high on Billy Napier's tenure there, and it may take another couple years for that thing to get turned around, in my opinion.
Okay, when you say not a fit, what I kind of thought I heard you say was it just the fact that he had not had another Power 5 job before he came from Louisiana. Is that what you're getting at, or do you think there's more to it?
I think that partly, you're learning everything when you're becoming basically the CEO of a larger corporation for the first time. you got to be in the right situation for that to work out. A la Kirby Smart at Georgia, right? He basically walked into a sleeping giant, and he had been with, the greatest football coach of all time for 12 years before that at Alabama and the Miami Dolphins, and even dating back to LSU. And Georgia wasn't far off. They were winning 10 games a year anyways. But Dan Mullen's tenure, even though I thought that Dan Mullen was the right guy for Florida, he didn't end up leaving it in a great position, especially defensively. And I think that the hurdle of having to learn all that for Billy Napier, plus him not necessarily being you're right. He's more of a disciplined, he's more of a very conservative guy. You go look at the guys that have won at Florida, Chris, it's a little bit different. Steve Spurrier is not exactly what you would call conservative or lack of flash. He was, and then Urban Meyer as well. We all know Urban Meyer's a little bit different than that mold as well. So I don't know. I just don't know if it's the best fit, as SC Scout Guy said in our comments.
Okay, as a sidebar, where does Dan Mullen end up? Because I don't think you want to really sit out 2 straight years, do you, and do the TV thing unless you really intend to be there long term.
Well, I mean, he's not going to take any of these jobs. I don't even know if there are many jobs. I don't think he's going to go be the next.
What's the best job open right now? I can't even think.
Well, I don't think he's going to go be the head coach at Navy. So other than that, other than
that would be fun.
That would be fun. But
Dan Mullen to the Service Academy and throw it around a bit.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Dan Mullen at Navy probably would be a good fit. Honestly, now that I think about it, he'd be creative with it over there running
the portal. How do you hit the portal at Navy? I guess
you can't. You can't. It's totally different ball game. But no, in all seriousness, I think Dan Mullen does wait another year because I think, listen, if he was going to take a job, Auburn went out and got Hugh Freeze. But if I was Auburn, I would have went out and gotten Dan Mullen because there's one thing that I think that Dan Mullen can do, and one reason I didn't understand why Florida got rid of Dan Mullen was because I thought that Dan Mullen was the one guy who could develop Anthony Richardson into the quarterback that everybody thought he could be, because that's what he's known for. He's a quarterback developer. He's done it. He did it with Dak Prescott. He did it with Kyle Trask. I mean, it's what he's done. And they got rid of him. They didn't have stellar quarterback play this year, even with Anthony Richardson, and they struggled, So the Scout Guy brings up another fit. Dan Mullen would have been a good fit at Georgia Tech, I think, as well. That he seems like a intellectual type there. He could speak the language to the Tech people, affectionately, the Georgia fan base that I'm around so much here, Chris, they refer to Georgia Tech as the nerds down the street. So that's how it kind of goes there. But I'm sure there's an element to that with Tennessee and Vanderbilt as well when they discuss that as well. But anyways, we've got sidebar on where Dan Mullen's going to go. We can get back to recruiting here. I mentioned Kentucky. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, because Kentucky landed 2 huge transfers in the last week. Ray Davis from Vanderbilt, and then getting Devin O'Leary.
Is it out of bounds to say that Devin Leary might be the biggest acquisition that Kentucky's ever made, whether it's a high school recruit or portal? Because this is a guy who, coming into this year, a lot of people thought that he would have a great year, follow up what his 2021 season was, and then be a first-round draft pick in the NFL, a la, Tim Couch, back in the day. And now they've brought in a guy who's that caliber of a quarterback, in my opinion. He's coming off the right torn pec, so he's got to. It's all, you got to make sure he's healthy. But obviously they felt pretty good about that because, they went out and gotten him. I believe that Devin Leary, you're talking about a guy who's over 66% completion rate, passed for 3,500 yards is in that 2021 season when he was last fully healthy, broke a lot of Phillip Rivers records at NC State. And anytime you're breaking Phillip Rivers records at NC State, Chris, you're doing something.
By the way, my apologies. I made him Irish. I called him O'Leary. I think because we were just talking about Georgia Tech. I was thinking about George O'Leary. But anyway, the minute that was out of my mouth, I'm like, wait a minute.
George O'Leary, who didn't he have the Notre Dame job for about two seconds, but he forged something.
I think so. I don't know if he had the job longer than oh, good grief.
At Alabama, who you're talking about.
Whose
name Price? Wasn't it Price?
Yes, Mike Price.
Mike Price at Alabama. So Chris,
I mean, I think
here he says UK is 5th in the East next year. If they finish 5th in the East next year with Ray Davis and Devin Leary, then Mark Stoops is going to be in trouble. Okay.
And now Liam Cohen, so you've got an offense again. But I had a thought here and I've lost it. Well, anyway, that's a big. I guess I wonder what they look like on the defensive side next year, because they took a little bit of a step down defensively, not a big one, but they didn't have some of the dudes they've had in the past. I think they had linebackers that have been there forever that'll be gone. I mean that's kind of a place where they've got an identity and they just sort of reload on that side of the ball. But I am curious to see how that goes next year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've got to be, but that's Mark Stoops' calling card, right? Is being able to develop guys on the defensive side of the ball. The question has always been, can they be explosive enough offensively? And I think bringing Liam Cohen back, like you said, it just makes that offense attractive. And that so now you pair Devin Leary up with and more experienced Barry Brown and more experienced Dane Key, Tavion Robinson probably coming back. And then you have Ray Davis at running back that kind of fills that void that Chris Rodriguez would have left. So really what it based on is, can they get more consistent offensive line play out of that offense? And we'll see. Yeah.
South Carolina scout guy had my comment that I was lost. Couch is, I believe, the highest rated player Kentucky's ever signed. That was back before recruiting services were really huge, but I think he was considered the number one player in the country by some services, or maybe at least the number one QB.
I mean, other than Tim Couch,
my memory there, but
other than Tim Couch, I think Kenyatta Goodwin or Godwin, whichever, I can't remember, is Kenyatta Goodwin or Godwin, a tackle. He actually was one of the highest ranked players ever, but he's entered the transfer portal. So for Kentucky, after playing in 11 games as tackle this year for him. So that'll be interesting. But man, they brought in some good prospects there. How about that with South Carolina? We mentioned it on a previous live stream. Jaheim Bell, Marshawn Lloyd both hit the portal. They're out at Jaheim Bell's at South Carolina. It's believed that Marshawn Lloyd's probably going to go to the other USC, from one USC to another, and go join Caleb Williams out there on the West Coast and Lincoln Riley. But with all the momentum they had at the end of the year, I was a little surprised to see some of those playmakers leave South Carolina, especially what I think Spencer Rattler's going to, come back and maybe be able to carry some of that momentum forward.
Yeah, I mean, looking in from the outside, Carolina is not the program that I think would have mass transfers. I mean, that seems like a good staff to play for. I might be wrong about that. I mean, look, people can fool you, but
listen, Shane Beamer is
a impression of Shane Beamer and heard good things about him. So I just thought that was a place where he'd be able to, and especially I think last year the way they finished, and this year the way they finished. I mean, Carolina was having pretty mediocre seasons in both cases. And when a team rallies and plays its best ball at the end of the year, and you remember all the issues Carolina had with quarterback last year, they didn't have one. They had me and you playing quarterback for them at the end of the year. That tells me a lot that a coach is building a good culture, you would think, where guys were enjoying their experience. So I think and everybody's different, right? Everybody's got a different story. Sometimes people have family situations. I don't know. I'm not even here to speculate on why guys left because I have no idea. But that was one that surprised me to see so many guys that had done some big things for them hit the portal when they did.
Yeah, I mean, all you can do is go out and try to reload, and of course, that's what South Carolina try to do. Xavion Hardy out of Macon, Georgia, as we said, Dontavius Braswell out of Sandersville, Georgia. So you're talking about that state of Georgia recruiting again. It comes back to that, Chris. Those are their two highest rated prospects they brought in the class. Dontavius Braswell, a running back that's out of Washington County down there in Georgia. He had an offer from Alabama. He talked to Georgia for a little while. They got Xavier McLeod, who they kept in state out of Camden, South Carolina. So Shane Beamer has parlayed this momentum into some success here. They're ranked 21st in the country when it comes to recruiting class. And listen, South Carolina's never been except maybe in the Spurrier years there where they really got too much higher than that in the recruiting realm of things. But listen, they're able to, and they're in the mix for a guy like Nichols Harbor, who's an absolute freak. He's 6'5", 230 pounds, and runs a 20, I think a 27 or a 20.79 in the 200, Chris, which is like Olympic type speed. In fact, the young man is even considering whether he's going to go play college football at all. He may go just run track professionally. That's how fast he is. But them, Maryland, Michigan are all in the thing for that. So listen, you beat Tennessee, you beat Clemson to end the year. So it's interesting to see where they'll finish up. I'm sure they'll want to address some things in the portal and stuff like that. But I think Shane Beamer, as you pointed out, is a player's coach. People like playing for him, and they're excited about things in Columbia.
Blayne, I want to ask you about Auburn because Auburn finished really well, in my opinion, for what that program went through, for the lateness, relatively speaking, of the coaching change. We know about all the drama at Auburn during the season, after the season, during the coaching search. And Auburn finished, 16th by rivals and landed some really good players late. I want to get your opinion on what Hugh Freeze did. But first, we have got a new sponsor here. They're Aura, A-U-R-A. And I really like these guys. I use them. I've got their stuff up and running on my computer now. We are always busy creating content at Southeastern 14, and the last thing we need is something that takes time and energy away from that. I've heard the nightmares about identity theft and financial theft, and as someone who does a lot of business online, I'm concerned about that happening to me. Well, guess what? I've started using Aura, and that's one less worry in my life now. We are thrilled that they are sponsoring our show because we want to let Aura help you too, and I'm going to pull up a QR code here that will be of interest if you would like to see what their offerings are. Excuse me while I get this running. There's a QR code. There we go. It is at the top left corner of your screen now. Anyway, Aura protects you from scammers and hackers by scanning the so-called dark web where criminals sell stolen information, looking for your emails, passwords, and social security numbers. Aura alerts you fast if it finds anything. And I'm going to show you one other thing because Aura is on my computer right now, and that's what's popped up on my computer. A lot of stuff where my information was where it didn't need to be. You can take action on those things. Aura helps you fight back against those annoying websites that make your personal information public by automatically requesting removal of your info. That helps reduce robocalls. Aura gives you near real-time alerts on suspicious credit inquiries. I've had that ping up on my email before. So if someone is opening a loan or credit card in your name, fortunately, that has not happened to me, but if it does, I'll let you know. Their VPN allows you to stay anonymous online by keeping your browsing history and their personal information safe and encrypted. I'm using that one too. They protect your devices from viruses, malware, spyware, and more so the bad guys can't break in, or even helps you manage what your kids can do on their devices. You can restrict apps Set screen time limits, even focus times to ensure your child is doing his homework instead of binging YouTube. Not that that would ever happen to my kids. Their password manager lets you store and access your online password securely and conveniently. Maybe you have had an app that does one of these things, but with Aura, you don't have to download and pay for 7 separate apps. I mean, these guys do a ton of stuff. It is crazy.
Hey,
I'm going to pull up a comparison here.
the more
Blayne, if you
secure,
don't have Aura, you need Aura. This is what these other things cost, and this is what you can get of Aura for 1 month. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with our link. That is Aura, AURA.com/SEC. You'll be shocked at how much of your private information Aura finds exposed over 2 weeks. That is the truth. I can tell you that from experience. It is a little frightening where your information can end up. And these guys are great at helping you find out where you're at risk. Help out our partners at Aura. Love this company. Got their stuff running on my machine right now. You're going to love them too. Anyway, go to aura.com/SEC. And you can also go back and look at that QR code that we flashed earlier. Okay,
So
Blayne, I asked you. Go ahead.
I was going to say from Aura to Auburn, right?
From Aura to Auburn.
Yeah.
There's probably a segue there, but I'm not thinking of it. But anyway, Hugh Freeze, I think under the circumstances, closed pretty well.
Well, Hugh Freeze did. I mean, he was there. He was kind of the figurehead, but Zach Etheridge and Cadillac Williams did the heavy lifting of this class. And I think Auburn just owes a immense amount of gratitude to Cadillac Williams and the effort and character that he handled the situation with towards the end of the year. Tremendous. And he had a big part to do with this class. You know, they get a splash there at the end, flipping Kayan Lee, a defensive back who'd been committed to Ohio State for a long time. And before Ohio State, he was committed to the University of Georgia. He flipped from Georgia to Ohio State, and then at the end flipped to Auburn. You know, a 4-star prospect out of Ellenwood, Georgia, that Cedar Grove High School. Once again, Chris, it just keeps coming back. These talented prospects coming out of the state of Georgia. But they were able to bring him in. They were able to keep Kedrick Falk in state, a defensive end, 6'5", 255. Those kind of guys but Kedrick Falk, I've seen him at some camps and stuff, prospect camps. This guy looks like he can, touch his ankles without even bending over, Chris. Like he's got the longest arms, Kedrick Falk does. So that's the kind of guy you need on the edge over there. And, it was much needed. They get Connor Liu, an offensive lineman out of Kennesaw in Georgia as well. So they took care of their normal areas. Also, someone from your neck of the woods where you normally are, not right now, but Hank Brown, a quarterback out of Nashville, Tennessee.
Trent Dilfer's kid, or Trent Dilfer's quarterback
at Lipscomb
High School, Lipscomb Academy, excuse me.
He's being coached well by Trent Dilfer, and now he's going to be coached well quarterback-wise with Hugh Freeze over there. So that's an exciting, exciting future for that young man. But listen, Auburn to kind of climb the ranks and go to where they did after kind of where they were with Brian Harsin a lot of times. At one point in time, Chris, I think I saw Auburn's rankings, team rankings drop down to like 70th something in the country. Like it was rough there for a little while. They at one point I think had two or three commits in the class, and now they've ended up with 19 and climbed up to 16. So we'll see. Hugh Freeze, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy at all. But a positive start for him, at least on the recruiting trail.
We skipped over Tennessee, not on purpose. The conversation just sort of took us in a different direction. What did you make of that class? Because it looks to me like Josh Heupel, and look, the recruiting was sort of one of the questions about him, that in building a defense, but he's done well. Now that is an energized fan base, and they've got a pretty active collective, I think, which look in the SEC, just about everybody does, but that's a class that rated 10th at Rivals. What did you make of it?
I mean, obviously, Nico Iamaleava is the shining star, 5-star, if you will, quarterback who man, it's going to be hard not to play him. I know Joe Milton supposedly has another year eligibility, and we'll see if he ends up coming back. But Nico Iamaleava is the future of that program. And they dip into Georgia, get a linebacker in Jalen Smith there. They got Caleb Herring, a guy out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, linebacker as well, 6'5", 210, so an athletic body. And Ethan Davis. Ethan Davis is a guy who didn't even play football until his junior year of high school. He was a basketball star. He comes out, plays for Collins Hill, teammates with Travis Hunter, who has been all over the news, going to Colorado with Deion Sanders. But he was really, if Travis Hunter hadn't have been on that team, Ethan Davis would have been who everybody talked about on that Collins Hill team, because he's unbelievably athletic, 6'5", 227 pounds, can play that flex tight end position. And I think, of course, you saw Hype will be able to use Princeton Fant and some of those guys in unique ways. He'll be able to do the same with Ethan Davis over there. And then Ricky Gibson. Listen, Ricky Gibson is a guy that Georgia wanted. He's a defensive back out of Trussville, Alabama. Georgia thought they were going to get him, and right when it came down to the commitment at the last end, Tennessee made a great pitch. There's also been reports that, like you said, that collective is not shy about helping get players aware of the opportunities that are available to them at Knoxville. And Ricky Gibson is a guy who runs a 4.340, jumps a 44-inch vertical. I mean, so they're getting a freak at defensive back in him. So good job by Josh Heupel in this class, top 10 class.
By the way, special shout out to a kid in that class named Aiden Bustle. His father was a college buddy of mine, so wishing him lots of luck. We did get to A&M. That was a decidedly different class in the rankings than it was a year ago.
Yeah, Texas A&M. Listen, they closed strong, because at one point they were way down there in the rankings, but they came up to 14. They didn't have nearly the amount of. Yeah, excuse me, Chris Foster. I forgot to talk about David Hobbs. David Hobbs is a stud as well. You're correct. Georgia and Alabama both wanted David Hobbs, and Tennessee won that recruitment. But back to Texas A&M, they had so many players in that 2022 class. In fact, 30 players in that number one ranked class. That was unbelievable. And now they have 18 at this point in this class in 2022. But guess what? They had 25 hit the portal. They had 25 players hit the portal. So, there's a there's a numbers discrepancy there. Now they do bring in guys.
How many kids out of last year's class hit the portal? What was the count on that?
I'd have to count them up. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly that, but I do know that it's a lot of them. Guys like Smoke Bowie, who was from Bainbridge, Georgia, is highly suspected to end up at Georgia. He's in the portal now. Denver Harris has went to LSU, one of the top corners in the country out of theirs. Chris Marshall is a wide receiver that they had signed. He's in the portal as well. So there's a lot of talent that is leaving College Station, but they are also bringing some good talent in. David Hicks Jr., one of the better defensive ends in the country, and then TJ Shanahan. This was a battle head to head between Texas A&M and Georgia thought they were going to get TJ Shanahan until right at the very end. And TJ Shanahan is an absolute mauler, 6'5", 315 pounds, that plays with a mean streak. Chris, he's a guy who finishes blocks. Like when, you've heard people say plays through the echo of the whistle. That's TJ Shanahan. He's just ultra aggressive and athletic to match. So that's a big pickup there for Texas A&M. And then they flipped Marcel Reed from Old Miss.
Local kid in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, so Marcel Reed, he plays at Montgomery Bell Academy up there. He's a guy who oddly enough, he's one of the few quarterbacks in the country, Chris, because of how everybody plays in high school now. He plays in a pro style system. He gets under center. He takes snaps under center. He has to work protections. He has to do some play action from under center. All things that will serve him well during his time with Jimbo Fisher. As we know that, they're saying that he's going to get some help on the offensive side of the ball. But as long as Jimbo Fisher's heart's beating, I think he's going to be the mastermind of his offenses. So they bring in him. They flip Reuben Owens at the end from Louisville, a dynamic running back out of El Campo, Texas, is as talented catching the ball out of the backfield as he is running it, and he's a slashing runner. So I expect to see Reuben Owens play next year. I would expect to see David Hicks play a big role next year. They got a big offensive lineman, Chase Basantis, out of New Jersey that Georgia wanted badly as well. Fran Brown came from the Rutgers area up there and became Georgia's defensive back coach, so they thought they had some inroads there. But Texas A&M, listen, the players that they brought in, they're good players. It's just not enough of them, in my opinion, to replace the 25 that are leaving off their roster. They're going to have to add some. And oh, by the way, a familiar name, Haynes King, ends up at Georgia Tech as a new quarterback for the Yellow Jackets over there. So a lot of movement in College Station, to say the least, Chris.
Blayne, let's wrap this up in a second because we got some teams that we haven't talked about. I think both the Mississippis. We haven't really hit Vanderbilt at all. We haven't hit Missouri at all. Those are probably the two lowest ranked classes in the league. And if I missed anybody else, it was not intentional. But before that, have you been on our partners at BROTHROW lately?
No, I need to get on there because I'm very intrigued by the ability that there's no juice involved. You can just make bets with friends straight up in terms of who you think is going to cover or who do you think is going to win outright. There's all different kind of ways to do it, bro.
Yeah, well, I'm not a guy who is engaged in sports betting in the past, but I'm dipping my toe in the waters a little bit. And the thing I like is the fact that if you want to bet $11 to win $10, you don't have to do that at BROTHROW. It is not a sports book. BROTHROW is a community of people that we are starting. You can sign in and you can join our community, and I'm going to tell you how to do that in just a minute. But it lets you bet on all 50 states. It's not the house, so bettors have a fair chance of winning. It's the only sports betting platform that doesn't take a cut of every bet. You don't have to deposit money into a BROTHROW account. No deposits, no minimum bets. You don't need to connect your bank account. Bettors pay each other directly, and it's a hassle-free sign-up process that lets you get in the action in seconds. You can go to brothrow.com/SE14. I believe we've got that in the scrolling marquee. I'm going to share my screen for people to see what this looks like. In any case, got in today. Placed a bet on that. I think I put a little bit of money on the over on Arkansas and Kansas in the bowl game. And I will share you my screen so you can see what that looks like. But anyway, if you have not been in this app, it is pretty dang cool. And I would advise you to help out those who help our partners. Let me pull this up here. There we go. Easy to do. You can find me in the app. You can get in, you can join our group at Southeastern 14. We'll have some fun over there, and you can challenge us on some stuff. If you don't like a take, maybe challenge us to a small bet or whatever. But anyway, BROTHROW is a cool new partner we have here at Southeastern 14. So help out the folks who help our show. All right, Blayne, wrapping up, I challenge you to talk about some of the schools we haven't covered yet. I think I mentioned 4. If I missed someone else, again, my apologies. But what do you make of the highlights of the schools we've not yet discussed?
I mean, when you're talking about teams in the SEC, that the unfortunate thing of it is, in the way that college football has become, it's kind of the haves and the have-nots, right? The difference between Georgia's Alabama and Georgia's 1 and 2 class, and even going down to Tennessee, who had a good number 10 class, that difference is massive. And when Georgia and Alabama already have that talent gap there, it's just hard for teams to make up, and that's where the portal is going to have to come into play for a lot of people. I do think you got to throw a lot of kudos out to the Mississippi State coaching staff.
Yeah,
and
man, what a rough circumstance.
Well, what they were able to accomplish, the 22nd ranked class in the country and 25 commits, and they held that all together after the Mike Leach situation goes down. Zach Arnett is able to kind of fortify what they had. And listen, Isaac Smith, a defensive back out of Fulton, Mississippi, talented player. A guy, had attention from other schools in the SEC. They're able to keep him in state. Tobias Hinton, one of the better players in all the state of Mississippi out of Hattiesburg, a linebacker. They keep him in there as well. So it's, I just think you have to give a lot of kudos to Zach Arnett and the staff that he had remaining there, just to be able to hold it together right before signing day. That's a massive achievement in my opinion, Chris.
Yeah. That was one that's like that's a tough job. But you know what? I'm looking at rivals. 2 of their top 3 recruits were kids that they brought in within the last week. That's impressive. I mean, I guess it's not. Look, a lot of these elite kids decide late, but I mean, all that stuff that program's going through with burying its head coach and all that's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, no doubt. It is. They also got a couple players out of Florida, a couple players out of Georgia. So you see them trying to expand their footprint as well, recruiting over there. But nope, it was a great, kind of signing day for the SEC once again. It looks like some schools like Ole Miss and Kentucky are definitely going to hit the portal harder than others. And we'll see if, Texas A&M, what happens there. Jimbo Fisher is crying about tampering, which is kind of hilarious in my point of view. But we'll see how everything ends up turning out on all this. But I enjoyed getting to talk SEC recruiting with you, Chris.
Yeah, Ole Miss, I just noticed, finished at 51. Of course, Ole Miss's main focus is going to be in the transfer market. But let's see. Any parting thoughts? I might have 1 or 2 on hoops.
Yeah, Gonzaga.
It's not been a good. That wasn't where I was going, but I should not have left the door open.
Gonzaga is the 2022 SEC basketball champions. They've defeated Kentucky and Alabama soundly. So Gonzaga, and just so you know, yes, I am a Gonzaga fan. You can see my Final Four shirt on here. So go Zags.
Yeah, well, that was an impressive win in Birmingham a week ago. And the SEC's had some bad losses. Ole Miss took one yesterday. Mississippi State wasn't a bad loss to Drake up in Lincoln, Nebraska, but it was the first loss of the year. Somebody else got upset the other night. Who was it? I know Georgia pulled off a good win against, who was it?
Notre Dame.
I mean, I say good win. Probably the name is bigger than the team this year. Vanderbilt almost got beat by Alabama A&M today, and I don't think Jerry Stackhouse is going to make it to next year, to be honest. So that'll be a thing to watch. But yeah, I mean, we got Missouri and Kansas going on right now. I need to do a score check of that one. I really would like to see, not Missouri and Kansas, Missouri and Illinois. Oh, and Missouri's hammering them. My goodness. Last time I checked the score, it was tied. Missouri's now up 53-30, and that game was in St. Louis. That's a big bounce back for the Tigers.
Attention to this. That was not a real game, Chris. That was a preseason scrimmage. It's no big deal. Not a real game. I don't count on the record. Let's not count that. They didn't that didn't count on Gonzaga's record. Their preseason scrimmage.
You're not talking to me. I'm sorry. I had the comments covered up.
No, yeah. Chris wanting to throw out preseason scrimmages on here.
Yeah, that it's a little too late for that. Well, I mean, Gonzaga did have a nice I think beating Alabama and Birmingham was impressive. I think right now you've got a top 3 in some order of Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee. I think that next group, and we did this on our power rankings. Kentucky's kind of in that next group in my mind. I don't know what to make about Mississippi State yet. I know that, again, that lost the first game to Drake. Has not exactly played a challenging schedule, but man, Missouri doing this to Illinois is impressive.
Yep. It's gonna be a fun season to watch, and a fun bowl season and college football playoff and everything coming up as well. But Chris, we've about tapped out tonight. We're gonna have to wrap it up for this live stream.
Yeah, parting thoughts. I knew South Carolina got a decent win over Western Kentucky today. That finished up about the time I think we were starting to broadcast. SC Scout Guy, women's basketball, would love to cover that, and we may get into that. I'm just not an expert at all.
Yeah, me neither.
In that market, but we may look to find someone to cover that.
I know South Carolina and Stanford are good.
The cold. So someone had texted me about or put something in here about the cold weather moving our way to Nashville. I'm actually doing this out in Pac-12 country tonight.
Him and Dion are hanging out.
I was going to go see Colorado play basketball last night, but the temperature yesterday out here, Blayne, literally in 3 hours dropped from 45 to -5.
No, it's going to be 5 degrees in Georgia tomorrow, I think. So,
and I'm looking out the window to my left where there's about 5 inches of snow that came down too. So it is bitter cold. It is. I think it's -15 at the moment where I am. I'm right in between the Colorado and Colorado State campuses where we are. I'm out seeing in-laws for the break. So, who were kind enough to let me set up studio here, so that accounts for the different background than you usually see. Yeah. So all this is probably headed your way if you are in our listening area, and be careful. It is bitter. 8 degrees in Charleston. Look at, did you see this? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I'm in the Denver area, and I think -15, which is what it's going to be tomorrow. I think that's been the coldest they've had in 35 or 40 years.
Yep.
I mean, you'd think it would be you'd think that would be as unusual as it is, but it's apparently going to be bitter cold everywhere. Yep. So bundle up and be safe. Blayne, any final words for us?
Merry Christmas to everyone.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas to everybody. We are kind of in that holiday transition where I'm going to be traveling a little bit. We've got a 1,200-mile drive back to Nashville Monday and Tuesday, so I'll be out of pocket. We're giving Blake a little time off to let his voice recover. Our man's been sick for a month now. We need to get him well. So anyway, we will be getting back on a more regular schedule here soon, but it is the holidays and we celebrate with our families just like everybody else. Hope you guys do also. Anyway, everybody have a Merry Christmas. We should see you before the new year, but if you're not on the broadcast, then Happy New Year. We do apologize for last night. We intended to do a live stream and life kind of happens. But anyway, for Blayne Gilmer, I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon at Southeastern 14.